So this is a presentation I made called Anatomical Bias in Mobility, which is a fancy way of saying why you should prescribe mobility exercises based on your athlete's anatomy, which is a super long title. It doesn't sound cool, but anatomical bias and mobility sounds a lot cooler. So that's what I put as my title. First point here I want to talk about, which I think is important to know. This is a Connor Harris PRI concept. I'm not 1,000% bought into this, but I think it's very helpful to know for everything else we're going to talk about. The general idea is that our bodies are asymmetrical due to gravity pulling us to the right side of our body. This results in the most commonly seen pattern, which is left AIC, right BC. That's just the common pattern. If you want to look it up, you're more than welcome to. It's a rabbit hole and a half, but I think it's an interesting concept. But the last point is important. This can result in limited range of motion in hips and shoulders. This is because we're twisted a certain way. But I want to get into this idea of limited range of motion due to where we are in space. That's called orientation. So we're going to go over two concepts after I read this point. Mobility work for someone who is stuck in orientation will not get benefit because they will move using orientation versus relative motion. So first, orientation. This is our pelvis right here, or this is a pelvis made with my hands. This is a pelvis. This is orientation right here. This, femur head. This is relative motion. So orientation is the skeleton. Relative motion is the movement of the joint. Super simple. So mobility work for someone who is stuck in orientation. This is a neutral orientation of the pelvis. So we could say someone is stuck in this orientation of their pelvis will not get benefit because they will move using orientation versus relative motion. Most mobility exercises, in my opinion, are prescribed for people who are in this orientation right here. Oh, you don't have external rotation? Let's spam some ER mobility drills to get external rotation. It could work, but they're going to be most likely, at least what I think, is their pelvis is off, and they're going to be using their pelvis, moving through orientation like this to get that ER rather than moving through this to get ER. That's just my thinking on it. That's why some mobility exercises will work for some athletes and won't for others because of their anatomical orientation. An athlete that's like this is going to completely different work from an athlete that's like this. You can be all over the spectrum of it, but that's basic. And also this is super, super exaggerated. No one's pelvis is actually like this. It's probably like maybe like that, just a tiny bit, but it's enough to throw stuff off. So why are some people's pelvis, or let's just say orientation in general, why are some orientations different than others? Your skeleton will adjust and move based on your breathing patterns. Ribs 5 through 7 are very malleable. I think that's the right word. They can basically become wider or narrow. That becomes ISA, which is another thing. But basically, your skeleton will change based on your breathing patterns. Why does this happen? Well, it happens because the only thing the body wants to do is stay alive. It does that through maintaining homeostasis. Homeostasis is regulated through breathing. So, and therefore, your body's orientation and the way the skeleton is based on your body's ability to stay alive. It's going to change its skeleton in order to breathe more efficiently. Now, what it thinks is efficiently isn't optimal. We could, we're sitting at a desk, this, text neck rolled forwards. That's not optimal, but that's what your body sees as inefficient because you're in that position so long. The body's like, I got to find a strategy now to breathe in this position. And so therefore things are going to change around and move around. So that's like the basic part of it. The diagram right here, we have 4 cavities which we can breathe into. They're called your medial sternal cavities. You have 4 right here: superior, anterior, middle, and posterior. Now the 2 biggest ones are middle and posterior. My next point says baseball players generally lack posterior and middle expansion. Let's pretend that general was generally. The 2 biggest cavities, in my opinion, are what baseball players lack. Why is this? Well, baseball is a rotation extension-based sport. It's also a flexion-based sport, but you rotate and extend to then throw and come through. But in order to flex, we have to take the front part of our body and do this with it, or at least that's spinal flexion. We have to take this part and do this. That involves compressing your superior and anterior mediastinum. The middle and posterior, in my opinion, are just along for the ride. But these two are doing the expansion, compression. If we're constantly trying to expand and compress here, the other two are going to be left behind, and they're going to lack the ability to expand and compress. So that's why I think baseball players really need to work on those two cavities. And that's in general how our pelvis can change. So if we're breathing through the front here, we're going to have poor access to the back. That could change our pelvis up, down, left, right, whatever. T-spine can do the same thing. Scaps can also move like that. One can be up and down. And there's tons of different reasons for that to happen. Lefties are generally similar. All righties have more variety. This is a movement thing. This has to deal with brain hemispheres and isn't really important for right now. But when I gave this presentation, it was an interesting point to share and explain, but doesn't matter for right now. So how do we fix this? So how do we fix an athlete whose pelvis is off, or they're missing mobility, or they need something with their T-spine or scaps? How do we fix this? Well, in my opinion, it's a double-edged sword, because we can have the athlete in a messed up orientation, what we perceive as messed up, but they could throw 97, but their pelvis is off. So who really cares about their pelvis being off if they throw 97 and they're healthy? It's another key thing is being healthy. Just because you throw hard doesn't mean you're going to be healthy. If you're healthy and you throw hard, leave the athlete alone, in my opinion. And that's as of right now. But there's not, you really need to work on, like, what am I going to give someone who throws 97 and is healthy? I mean, we can obviously try and push for 100, but that's another issue. But so let's say this is an issue now. Now, how do we fix it? Well, what I would do is assess the athlete and see where their limitations are. You can assess daily. That's a lot of work, but you can. But basically, assess them, see where their pelvis is in space, put them through table tests, see how they're moving, and how they're moving will then tell you where they are in space. Once you know how they're moving, we can open the specific area you need. So basically, an area that's going to be lacking movement is usually compressed. So we need to expand that area, give them the ability to breathe in it, give them the ability to move. Then once we're there and we're in that correct orientation, we've opened up that space, then we can give them mobility work to help move and build trust and to understand what it feels like to move in that area. However, breath work isn't the only thing. Clayton Thompson talked about this. He's a really good follow, that you need a super high stimulus in order to solidify that. That high stimulus is going to be found in the weight room. So if you open up that space with the breath, give it some movement, and then you go to the weight room to solidify that position, I think that's the way to do it. And to solidify position, it could be, if we're chasing ER, we're then going to do a heavy squat. Or if we're chasing IR, we're going to do some sort of hinge movement. We're going to do something to then reinforce that pattern with that new movement ability. And over time, it should continue to move in that direction and give them this ability to move that they were lacking before. Now, it's really good if someone's in pain. That's a really good thing to do, because if someone's in pain, there's something going wrong. Or if, they're stuck at a velocity ceiling, it could be a good way to help. But that's like what I would use this for. So last part of this is just going to go into some anecdotal evidence, data, results that I've seen with this. So on the left here, you can see these two videos were taken 8 days apart. On the left, you can see that hips and shoulders are not rotating in the same plane. Front side is flying a little bit open. There's a lot of things that you can see there. Those are the basic ones. 8 days later, hips and shoulders were rotating in the same plane. This was both on a turn and burn style plyo drill, not really turn and burn, more of like a step back. So same drill, 8 days apart, prescribing areas that I thought we needed to fix, 8 days apart. On the right here, this is 5 minutes. This is a little, on the right here, this is more PRI-y, a little more Connor Harris stuff that is cool. And I mean, it works here, but if you can see here, lacking IR, this athlete is left-handed, lacking IR in that right side. 5 minutes of going through breath work and doing some stuff in the weight room. We've now gained some IR. I know his left hip is slightly turning out, as you can see, his left foot here. But in general, it's a lot better than we had 5 minutes ago. Last example here. This is going to be the example of moving through orientation, just dipping to the right in order to create rotation rather than creating rotation from the middle. You can see by the red line on the red shirt, probably should use a different color, but we can see that rotation is slightly better within 5 minutes. I know the hands are a different placement, all that, but what we did is we gave him the ability to actually get into his hips rather than being on top of his hips. We were to gain that rotation. So in general, find out where your athlete is in their skeleton, see what areas they need to work on before just giving them mobility. So assess them, see where their skeleton is, and then based on where their skeleton is, open up that with breath work. Then after that, mobility, and then weight room.